You deserve your own compassion and forgiveness, and so do your parents. This is something I've been struggling with lately and releasing, doing a lot of shadow work related to my parents. I feel that I've had a lot of anger still towards them. Even though I've done a lot of shadow work on my parents in the past, there's still layers and more of this coming up. I've lost some weight lately. You might be able to tell in comparison to some of my other videos where I was heavier. I have a bodybuilding goal, as I've shared in a lot of my other videos. I've lost almost 30 pounds in a little over 4 months, the healthy way, tracking my calories, walking, eating really healthy and lighter food, getting enough protein. I feel really good. I feel really strong. I feel really grateful. But at the same time that I'm losing this weight and actually toning up, getting more muscular, at the same time, there's also new stuff coming up. There's almost a shedding that's coming up with the weight loss and actually achieving, reaching one of my goals, which is to get really fit and be in the best shape I've ever been in. And there's also some stuff coming up because I actually used to overeat. I used to have a bit of an addiction to food. I think I expressed that TV was a former addiction as well. And that has actually shifted, I've noticed lately, to somewhat of a shopping addiction because I've had to get new clothes that fit me. I had clothes that were multiple sizes too big now. And I had to size down to clothes that actually do fit and that I feel better in and feel more attractive and that just seem to resonate a little bit better with my body changing in a healthy way that I'm enjoying. And at the same time, I found myself becoming a little addicted to shopping in recent times, not just with clothes, but with decorating my house, making it feel more me, more authentic and beautiful. And all of that's beautiful and great and good. But it was actually starting to feel a little obsessive and stressful. And it was reminiscent of old addictive patterns related to overeating and watching too many movies, binge watching movies or a TV show. It happened to be more so food and movies in the past. Now it's become more of a shopping obsession. If I see a cute sweater that's a floral print or a shirt or whatever, there's been a desire to just keep getting. And that's been a little bit normalized in my consciousness. And I feel this tension of, I think I've gotten enough. There's a stopping point. There's a point where, yes, you need more clothes, especially if you have lost 20, 30 pounds, because otherwise your clothes would be too baggy. And you want to get clothes that you feel good in that resonate with your body feeling more you, especially if you've lost some weight and it feels very positive for you. And that was a goal that you held and are just doing that now and are very pleased with your results. There's a goodness there. And at the same time, there seems to be this energy that I'm being asked to confront and something here that feels like I'm overspending. I feel that I'm overspending. I've been doing that recently, buying too many things. As much as I like the new things I bought and feel good in it and feel more attractive in my new clothes, especially with my new figure and more sculpted physique, I also feel like, okay, there's got to be a stopping point here. This is plenty. I have enough beautiful new clothes and it's time to slow that down and stop. But that was actually hard for me today. Just tell you a quick story. I saw this sweater in a movie that I really liked. It was this pretty floral print, and it wasn't even something you could buy in most places. You had to look on ThredUp or Poshmark or somewhere like that. And I actually found one in a small size that would fit. And I just found myself getting a little anxious about, okay, are they going to accept my offer? And it felt like this was just anxious, like obsessive thinking type of energy that was reminiscent of the anxiety I used to experience in the past related to time, not feeling like I had enough time. Sometimes we feel that with food. For me, I would feel anxious when it came to food sometimes, wanting certain things, but knowing I shouldn't eat that extra thing. There was a habit, an ingrained habit of eating these things that I knew was too much for me or was overdoing it. Binge watching a show when you know you shouldn't. There's a dopamine hit that you're getting from binge watching that show or binge watching lots of movies that you like, usually in the same genre, or a particular food like ice cream or cookies or whatever that might be, potato chips that you might be addicted to. But if you feel this compulsive need, like I did to buy this particular sweater with flowers on it, and it was cute. Don't get me wrong, it's a very cute sweater. But that should be a sign if your body is getting viscerally anxious and feeling attached, like it has to do this, it has to get this thing, it has to eat that last chocolate bar or that last scoop of ice cream or has to have some more chips or whatever it is, watch another movie, binge watch that show for 8 hours in one day, or shopping in my case for another shirt that I didn't need. We have to pause and reflect and ask, what am I doing to my consciousness? It's important to pause and check in with the energy that that's creating in you. How are you feeling? What's happening inside your body? So in this case, I knew that this was something deeper than just this addiction. I had created a habit where I had rationalized because I've lost almost 30 pounds since just 4 months ago. I had gotten in a habit of buying lots of new clothes and smaller sizes recently. So, yes, there was a need, and that was justified for a while until it just became a habit of buying so many new things. There was this dopamine addiction to continuing to shop for cute new floral patterned clothing. It had to come to a stop today. It was time to slow down, way, way down, and start questioning what is going on here. There's something here that's off. There's something here that I'm not tending to. Essentially, I'm abandoning myself through distraction. So I've been distracting myself through the medium of shopping. We find lots of ways to distract ourselves. For everybody, it's not shopping. And for me, it hasn't always been shopping. It's been other things, as I've shared in the past, like binge watching Netflix or Hallmark movies and food at times too. It's different for everyone. So this still can apply even if your particular form of doing something compulsively or obsessively to the point of where it's starting to form into somewhat of an addiction. It's important to recognize that and recognize what's happening with your body when you're doing this, when you feel this rush, this adrenaline surge, this dopamine rush to keep doing that particular activity, whether it's watching another episode of your favorite show, getting another scoop of ice cream, whatever it might be. It's different for everybody. Buying another sweater in my case. So you just have to stop and pause and look at that and see what's happening in your body. And those emotions, they feel off. They don't feel good. Sometimes you'll feel guilty. I was starting to feel a little bit guilty. I know I'm spending a little too much on clothing. Even though I feel better in this clothing, I know that I'm starting to overdo it and I have more than I need at this point. So it's really time to stop. And this is never just about the thing. It's never just about the clothing item. It's never just about the food. It's never about watching that additional episode or that other movie or whatever it is. It's usually about avoiding yourself, abandoning yourself. There's a fear of being with that uncomfortable emotion that wants to come up, that wants to be felt, something that you suppressed or repressed, a painful emotion as a child of not feeling seen, validated, unconditionally loved, held, heard, not feeling like you could be your authentic self without being criticized. That's a huge thing for me. My parents, especially my dad, was very judgmental, very critical. He had the narcissistic personality. So if I didn't act like the perfect daughter for him all the time, being who he wanted me to be, that was a reason to be criticized and put down and shamed. So that was my experience growing up, and that was very challenging for me. And I've worked with this particular part of me, as I've talked about IFS work, parts work in some past videos. I've worked with this part of me before, but there's still layers because this is a really deep wound, especially our wounds with our parents that started when we were so young. What came up today seemed like it was from somewhere between age 4 to 7. I just had this memory of this little girl feeling like so not enough. And I think I probably was first grade or something, working on homework. Usually it was my math homework that I just didn't always get right away and needed some extra help or attention. And it was frustrating. And I always felt like I was falling short and not getting it fast enough for my dad, who would cover over me to make sure I did it right. That was the memory that came up, as well as my mom being very into people pleasing. She wanted everyone's approval outside of her immediate family. She didn't care so much about my approval or my dad's approval, but she cared a lot about her extended family's approval and her friends' approval. So she would overgive and people please and babysit kids for free in the neighborhood, which my dad resented. And she just was always super nice and overgiving to all of her friends, and really was a very social person, and in a sense meant well, but this was her way of abandoning herself by overgiving to all of her friends and some of her extended family. She was always trying to be liked by them, liked by her friends. It's like it was never enough. She could never reach some point where she felt enough and she had given enough. She just had to compulsively people please. And then when she was at home with us, nobody else was around to see it. She was actually not trying to please anybody so much. She was more like the opposite of that, which hurt me. And she complained a lot. She was grumpy and complained a lot, I would say, when it was just me and my dad in the house. I just felt like I was not enough and I didn't really have her attention, but some of the neighborhood kids would have her attention more than I would because she cared about their parents really liking her. But because I was her kid, it didn't really matter. She could treat me how she wanted to treat me, which was not being emotionally present for me. She was abandoning herself and distracted in her own little world, always thinking about other people beyond our family unit and wanting them to like her. So it was really all about her and her ego and getting that approval, that outside validation. And I just didn't feel loved. I didn't feel genuinely cared for and loved, even though on the surface she performed a lot of quote unquote surface level, pretty good mother roles because she was babysitting. I had friends to play with. I had other kids my age to play with. Oftentimes, because of that, I didn't feel loved and attended to in a real genuine way because she didn't have the emotional capacity or bandwidth. Her care was to be approved by others. And for my dad, the pressure was put on me to be pleasing him and to get really good grades and to win all of my softball matches, do really well, play really well, just be the perfect kid for him. It was very conditional acceptance type parenting. And both of my parents didn't have the bandwidth or capacity. They were abandoning themselves. It's very clear how my mom was abandoning herself. My dad, he has a narcissistic wound, so he was abandoning himself too. The narcissistic wound isn't really self-loving. They really have a lot of self-hatred, but it comes out in this projection onto others of trying to get other people to do their bidding in the way that they want and turning some people into flying monkeys, and especially an overt narcissist showing that disapproval in a very visceral way. When you do something, anything, even a very small thing to displease them, they would let you know that. The shaming would be pretty visceral and harsh at times. So a lot of criticism, and that was hard to live with. So there was these wounds, and my parents, from what I described, you can probably interpret that they had a very dysfunctional relationship. They were very unhappy in their marriage. I realized that that's where this comes from. Any compulsive, obsessive behaviors that I've had, whether it's the older ones that I don't feel so prevalent right now, such as the food thing and overwatching TV. I watch a movie here and there, but nothing like I used to when I binge watched. That was my only source of joy a decade ago or so. I have a much more rich and fulfilling life now, which I'm very grateful for. A husband who loves me and beautiful cat kids. And I like to read novels too on my free time. So I do a lot more well-rounded things and I'm more busy than I used to be. Whereas before, binge watching a TV series could just hook me because I just didn't have much else going. I would work and do that and then overeat at the same time sometimes and binge on certain foods that were pleasure foods. They would trigger those pleasure centers of the brain because that felt like my only real source of pleasure, which there was a lot of sadness in there that I wasn't looking at, that I was avoiding being with. Even if I was partially aware of it, which I did become more and more aware over time, there was for a while an unwillingness to actually be with these parts of me, these child parts of me that were really hurting. And this is where shadow work comes in and is so helpful. So Today I did a little journaling on this, and you could do the same thing. So I'm going to encourage you to do that. And maybe I'll put up a one-page sheet here just prompting you if you go through this process. This could be very helpful. Of course, you have to be in the right space, have the time and space, set that aside to do this, and make sure you're in a safe place and a private space where you have some time to devote to shadow work. But the part of it that was most profound for me is just writing out where the real hurt was for me and what was feeding this. It always comes out, what we've repressed always comes out in these strange ways that we need to look at and be with more, these parts that we need to hold. And like I said, I've done this before in the past, but there were new layers that wanted to come up today, new layers that were deriving this distracted, self-abandoning behavior of over shopping in recent months. So I was avoiding really being with myself and abandoning myself, finding ways to distract myself. But I had to just sit with this. What is driving this behavior? What really hurts? What's underneath this? Because this is starting to cause a little bit of suffering. And what I realized, what I wrote down when I just gave myself some space to actually sit with this was this people-pleasing pattern in my mom. And like I said, I had seen this a bit before, but I hadn't written about it in a while. There were new layers that I hadn't really felt or sat with. And certain memories came up too that felt like I was afraid to see those memories related to my dad and mom that I just described, the neighborhood kids and her seeming to be more there for them in the case of my mom, and my dad hovering over my math homework when I was 6 or 7. Those memories came up. And that's what I had to sit with. And I just wrote out that what really hurt was my mom cared more about others and people pleasing her friends' children because they were associated with her friends. She had this compulsive need to feel liked. And it often came at the expense of giving me this positive, loving, affectionate, there for me emotional attention. So the empowering statement after that was most healing after writing that was, and that's okay. Like, in some way, it doesn't feel okay because we have this belief that all parents are supposed to be emotionally available for their kids and loving their kids. But there's a higher spiritual perspective. And I know I've talked about radical forgiveness work before. So this is very akin to this. This is very adjacent to doing radical forgiveness work, but it's a little bit more free-handed that I just made this up myself. I just said, and that's okay. And it's worth forgiving her. And I actually bolded that. I just did it on my laptop. You can write it out. You can write it on your laptop, whichever's easiest. It doesn't matter if it's a notebook, handwritten, or laptop. I wrote it out there. I saved it. And I bolded that. And that's okay. And it's worth forgiving her. And then I did the same for my dad because it felt like there were two things coming up for both parents. My dad was intense. He was hard to please. He was abusive with his words. I was always seeking his approval. He didn't know how to love me as I was, the authentic, real me. I felt like my creative, more whimsical, feminine sides were judged by him. He didn't know how to love me or accept me without my meeting his stern conditions and high standards for approval. And that's okay. And it's worth forgiving. So that's what I said for him. And just to say, and that's okay, and it's worth forgiving, to first acknowledge the pain that it caused you, because we're not dismissing that it didn't matter, that it didn't hurt. We're actually acknowledging, we're being with ourselves, we're being with the part of us that hurts. And we're saying that's okay, and it's worth forgiving. And I was crying as I was doing this too. This could potentially be used as a spiritual bypass. So I want you to be wary of that if you don't feel any raw emotion coming up with this, because the point is to actually release some of the emotion and remember without harping on what happened in the victim story of what happened. Just remember there was a part of you, a younger part of you, that really pushed that down and didn't even want to remember. Probably the memory hasn't been really fresh in your mind. Maybe it's just coming up for the first time now if it was especially painful. But those two memories, as I described, were coming up most viscerally for me. And that's okay, and it's worth forgiving. And I also said, the next short paragraph here was, my parents had a very dysfunctional, resentful, unhealthy, narcissistic / codependent marriage where they withheld affection from themselves, each other and myself. They abandoned themselves. So they couldn't really be there for me. And that's okay. And it's worth forgiving them. And then more recently, I felt like there's something that I need to forgive in myself too, because I've been feeling a bit guilty and shameful for being a bit compulsive lately and buying more than I really need. I'm not saying don't ever treat yourself, have fun, enjoy life. But at the same time, when it starts feeling compulsive or obsessive or addictive, that's when you know that it's not feeding your soul. You don't have a healthy relationship to that particular activity. You're doing it too much and it's starting to cause you some suffering. And there's a wisdom there when you start to feel those feelings. So I wrote, I've been experiencing a compulsive shopping addiction loop more since losing lots of weight. I was somewhat conscious, but also feeling very impulsive. Like I needed these things to feel better or more worthy and enough. And that's okay. It's worth forgiving. So it's worth forgiving yourself for that. It's okay and it's worth forgiving. And I can feel that that was connected to my parents not giving me the positive emotional attention that I craved as a 4, 5, 6, 7, 8-year-old child, not feeling enough, this validation, this wanting to be seen as enough, as worthy, as good. There was a feeling of inadequacy running this based on the trauma I had experienced with my parents in the past as a kid. It's worth forgiving. That's okay. And it's worth forgiving yourself. I also wrote next, I've been wanting to slow down my shopping impulse for weeks and have slowed it a little, but not completely, and still feel a bit addicted and impulsive when I see something I really like. I find myself jumping to buy it. Okay, and so I have to accept that that's been my pattern recently for the past few weeks, months, and that's okay, and it's worth forgiving. And then I also had some feelings of feeling a little embarrassed and guilty where my husband's concerned because what affects us a little financially, it hasn't been so over the top that it's caused us financial strain really, but it was still not feeling right. And I knew it was starting to be too much. And so I did feel a bit embarrassed and a little bit guilty about where my husband's concerned. And that's okay. I don't want to cause him or myself any suffering or strain. I'm sorry. Please forgive me. I love you. I thank you. And then I said, I'm sorry. Please forgive me. I love you. I thank you. So that's actually coming from the Hooponopono prayer. I'm not sure if I've discussed that in past videos. I might have, probably. It's something I've used quite frequently to help me when I feel something difficult coming up where I feel like I've caused some harm either to myself or to another person. This I'm sorry, please forgive me, I love you, I thank you is a very powerful thing. And it doesn't even have to be harm that you caused. It can be harm that's been done to you. I use that phrase too when I'm remembering a particular difficult situation with my parents, just apologizing to myself that this even happened and that it was so painful. This is very powerful work to repeat the I'm sorry, please forgive me, I love you, I thank you, the Ho'oponopono prayer or phrase, just to repeat that over and over to yourself for as long as it feels good to you for anything in the past that was done to you or that you did to someone else. It can be extremely nurturing and healing. So I felt in that moment that I had to write that. I was starting to feel not good about how I was acting and how impulsive I was acting related to my shopping recently. And I was apologizing to both myself and to my husband in that moment. I felt like energetically, this energy was starting to shift out of my system after I finished this process. And there's more to it. There's a reframe part of it as well. But after I finished this process, I really felt like it left me. I really have enough. I'm good. I saw through what I needed to see through, what was really hurting and what was driving it, something that I was avoiding seeing those scenarios with my parents, with my mom and dad. when I was young, even though I had seen parts of it before. I hadn't quite seen it to this degree before and had those exact memories come up. And seeing that, having those memories come up, not dwelling on the memory itself, but allowing it the space for it to come up and be there while holding a compassionate space for myself with the intention not to judge, but to basically permissively say, this is okay. This is okay that this happened and it happened this way and it caused this pain. And it's worth forgiving myself. And it's worth forgiving both of my parents and their marriage. And it's worth forgiving myself in relationship to my husband and the shopping addiction, all of it. The next part of this was a reframe. So after you write out what is really the crux of it, and it may not be a writing process for you. For you, it may be more of a going within and visual. For me, I'm visual, but I also like to write as well. So sometimes writing is best. Sometimes just doing a meditation is best, or sometimes it's a combination of both. So it just depends on what's right for you. For some people, it's more sound and music. So you just have to find what is your language to work with in terms of doing this. I would say radical forgiveness adjacent, not calling it exactly radical forgiveness because it's not that exact process by Colin Tipping, but it's radical forgiveness adjacent shadow work is what I would call it. So the reframe, I'm just naming some positive things that came from this. And that's the reframe that Colin Tipping would talk about, like reframing a situation that was really painful or where you felt you were hurt, you hurt someone else. To reframe and actually discover what you took away from this that was positive. And so for the first one, I focused on my mom because she was the first person I wrote about in that reflection, that shadow work reflection. Well, intuitively, I just want to hold my heart in this situation. And that's what I did earlier. I was holding my heart space while I was doing that. And I definitely had a lot of tears coming up. So this is what the situation taught me that I'm really actually quite grateful for. And part of it's going to sound a little negative because she basically taught me how not to be. And it took me a long time to learn how not to be. She taught me how I didn't want to be. And so she showed me the great cost of codependency and choosing a narcissistic partner in marriage, which in the case of my father, she showed me what a weak woman and parent or female role model looked like. She showed me what it looks like to be a disempowered person who habitually abandoned herself and didn't take time to pause and reflect and do shadow work like I'm doing now. And because she abandoned herself quite a lot, she wasn't really capable of being emotionally there for me, present with me as a mature female role model. But it was a gift to see the negative embodiment of the wounded feminine in my mom. I think that's a big part of the lesson I incarnated in this by choosing her. If you believe in this, that we choose our parents right before we're born, some people believe that, some people don't. I mostly believe it. I do feel like I probably chose certain soul or life lessons to have, and I possibly did choose my parents. So just following that train of thought. For me in this lifetime with the mother that I had, whether you believe we chose it or not, kind of doesn't matter. But it was a gift to see the negative embodiment of this wounded feminine polarity that really showed up in her. So I would learn the signs and how to move and choose differently as a woman in time. So thank you, Mom, for showing me your shadow so strongly so that I could heal my wounded feminine shadow. Your choice of marriage to my dad likely saved me from doing what you did. I chose differently in terms of a marriage partner. And I waited. I waited till I was out of my 20s, well into my 30s, to choose a partner. I allowed myself to take extra time choosing a partner, but I did actually attract quite a few narcissistic relationships before that. I never married the person, I never had kids with them, but I did date some narcissistic people for some months, or in one case, it was a year or two. So I did have that experience, and it taught me what I didn't want, and I did see that reflected. It just felt too familiar. This is very similar trauma to what I grew up with, and it didn't feel right. And thankfully, I had the wherewithal and enough wisdom to leave those relationships, or in some cases, they left me, but it was for the best, and I'm super grateful. So reframing this, she taught me what I didn't want and what I didn't want to choose as I grew older, as I grew more wise and capable of having more perspective around this and progressively healed these wounds. I'm grateful that I was able to choose an unconditionally loving marriage partner, which I have in my husband now. Her example in the marriage of my father also saved me from having kids, I think, with a partner that could have been narcissistic or would have been unhealthy for me. I wouldn't have wanted to bring a kid into a situation like that, a similar situation that I grew up in with similar trauma patterns as well. And so that was part of her gift because the pain that I saw in her, the wounded feminine in her, I didn't want it. And I knew that. And so I had enough wherewithal to be like, nope, nope, nope. And wait as long as I needed to find the right one. And really, I needed to mature a lot emotionally and spiritually, which I did over all those years to attract an unconditionally loving partner, the partner that I have now, who I am married to. But I'm so grateful that I didn't get married at 25 or 22 or even in my early 30s. I don't think I was ready. It took me to my mid to late 30s to find the partner that I'm with now. So her example was really a blessing. And I'm grateful that you unintentionally taught me to take my time when it came to marriage. She taught me to take my time through her not so positive example because she got married when she was 20. She just got married really young. That was common back then in the late 1960s. But nonetheless, whether it was common or not, her example taught me that getting married young may not be the best path for me. I'm very grateful that was part of the lesson that she bestowed to me. So this is, again, we're doing the positive reframe on the first person or the first parent. So I wrote that I'm grateful that you unintentionally taught me to take my time when it came to marriage and the possibility of kids. I'm grateful that I didn't marry a narcissist and didn't have kids with one, even though I dated some when I was younger. And I love my husband a lot, and I know he loves me, even though I'm a flawed human being who is still capable of acting impulsively and addictively at times with certain things like shopping. I'm grateful that I'm living a much better life than you did because her life wasn't such a happy one. Thank you for this example that you said, even though it wasn't a positive example, thank you. And then I wrote, it did actually help me a lot. Thank you for being my healing angel, ultimately, Mom. And I'm very grateful. This must have been exactly what I needed. So when you reframe a traumatic memory, a traumatic experience, a trauma pattern that you had with one or more of your parents like that, this can feel very nourishing because you're recognizing that your soul or your spirit, if it did choose this parent before you came into this body, you're recognizing the blessing in that choice. And whether or not you did choose it, that ultimately doesn't matter, but that it served you, it served your soul, it served your evolution, your spiritual evolution, your emotional evolution, so that you could choose differently moving forward, so that you would steer clear of making certain choices. And even if you did make those similar choices, similar to your parents for a while, you were able to move beyond that faster than they did. My parents stayed in a very dysfunctional, unhappy marriage for about 40 years. So that's a very long time. And I only stayed in those not so great relationships before meeting my husband for months or a few years at most. And I never had kids with them. So I'm very grateful. That is a huge lesson that my mom imparted, that both of my parents imparted to me, that I can be very grateful for. So, in the case of my dad, doing a reframe on the second person, I wrote positives that came from this situation with my dad. So, the pain from my dad's emotional abuse has compelled me to go within and to learn how not to abandon myself so much. They actually both taught me how not to abandon myself so much through them abandoning themselves and not being emotionally available for me, being emotionally immature parents. It taught me how to approve of myself ultimately, in spite of my imperfections, because nothing was good enough for him. He was hard to please. I felt very flawed, and I felt like my uniqueness wasn't really readily accepted by him unless it matched something that he valued specifically. And my creative, more feminine side wasn't something he could relate to or value and would see as not great. And he would be more critical of my more wild and whimsical, creative aspects of my personality. So I wrote that pain from his emotional unavailability and emotional criticism, abuse at times, compelled me to go within and learn how not to abandon myself so much. It taught me how to approve of myself in spite of my imperfections, flaws, uniqueness, and creative, wild, whimsical, feminine attributes and humanness. So he taught me unintentionally to accept myself and to forgive me and to live in a more authentic to myself kind of way through his disapproval, ultimately. Of course, he didn't intend to teach me this, but this was the longer term result. And so, more of that disapproval and punishment that I felt from him, I was able to reclaim as I got older and wiser and started to forgive and heal these parts of me that had been pushed down and not accepted by him. I've been learning to be my own person more and more in my 30s and 40s, and I'm learning to care less what he would think about my choices, desires, and pursuits. I've learned not to seek outside of myself that much, if at all, for others' approval, but to go my own way. So this is all a positive reframe. This is you taking your power back. What have you really gained over time as a result of having, in my case, a disapproving, narcissistic, critical parent? So what did you gain from that? What did you learn from that? Ultimately, it's led me to become more my authentic self and to approve of myself. So I'm very grateful for that. His emphasis on pleasing him and being perfect for him has taught me to let go of perfectionism more and more and to please myself and to do what I want in life. It taught me ultimately not to confide in him because I don't feel like I can trust him with telling him anything deep about me, or not to share deep, important things about my life, but just keep our conversations superficial. That's protecting myself. So I'm really grateful that I learned that. It took me some time to learn that, but I did. He taught me not to trust him and to set boundaries with him and others because everybody's wired differently. And there are a lot of critical, disapproving people, people with narcissistic personalities. And again, this doesn't make these people bad, but it means you have to have wise boundaries because you have to protect yourself and you have to take care of you and love you and be your most authentic self to really be happy and to really flourish and have the possibility of thriving and not just getting by and surviving. So it's important to have strong boundaries, which I've talked about in past videos with others, but that was something I didn't always know how to do. And it's taken lots of time and reflection and shadow work and lots of radical forgiveness work as well to get to this point of realizing, yes, I need boundaries with other people. And my dad was a great catalyst for having to learn how to set boundaries because of how critical he was, judgmental he was, and saw things through a very narrow lens that was just for him. And that, again, had to probably do with his trauma patterns from his childhood, his experiences that he hasn't had a chance to work through in this lifetime and probably never will, given his age and where he is and everything. But the same went for my mom. She didn't have a chance or really the inclination, neither one of them did, to work through this. But that's okay. That is ultimately okay. And to feel that's okay within your being and to acknowledge what you've learned and what you've taken away from the painful experiences you had with one or both of your parents is extremely powerful and extremely healing. I wrote his disapproval, an impossible to please personality taught me to let go of needing his approval and to approve of myself as an imperfect, flawed, deeply creative, fanciful at times, human person who accepts herself. I am grateful that he unintentionally and ultimately taught me the opposite of what he intended to teach me. I'm grateful that his parenting ultimately allowed me to learn to care a lot less about others' approval and validation. He, more than anyone, contributed to my claiming the previously disowned, denied, and repressed parts of my being because of his disapproval. Thank you for being my healing angel. I can see that this all served me so well. Thank you for the critical and disapproving example you set. This must have been exactly what I needed. And then lastly, I did this radical reframe for myself because I also wrote about myself previously earlier on in this shadow work activity here. So this was myself, the three positives that came from the situation, this recent situation of feeling like I had a bit of a shopping addiction, was buying too many things compulsively. So the three positives and the reframe that's coming from this is I gave myself an opportunity to heal a not enough wound that originated from my childhood from these recent experiences of buying clothes too often and compulsively. I was trying to fill a void that I was avoiding feeling fully and may still be avoiding feeling all of it completely. I don't know if there are more layers to this, but I'm acknowledging that that's a possibility here. I was abandoning myself and putting shopping before shadow work and making shopping more important than shadow work and inner healing and self love. I see I've been abandoning and making surface level egoic excuses to keep abandoning myself through distraction and compulsive spending on things I don't need. Despite this time of distraction, compulsiveness, and self abandonment, I did pause to do shadow work today. So I'm acknowledging what I stopped and did for myself today that was very nourishing and healing. And to follow through on this exercise here, I'm not abandoning myself in this moment. I'm showing up for myself and letting myself feel and cry and get out of my head and the story. I'm letting myself feel as bad as I need to today. I'm welcoming feelings of guilt, shame, and disappointment in myself. And I'm choosing not to jump back into some other addictive habit, maybe like binge watching a Hallmark movie or just another form of distraction. Instead, I'm giving myself permission to sit with my feelings, to feel them fully, to do more shadow work as I feel called to today. Whatever you felt, it's important to pause and check in with yourself. What are you avoiding? What is driving this? What are you distracting yourself from feeling? It's always that you're distracting yourself from feeling something painful, something that wants to come up, something that wants to release, that's ready. Yet your ego is saying, no, I'm not ready, and is afraid to feel it, to heal it, essentially. And so it's looking for different distractions, whatever that might be for you. It's different for everybody. No particular distraction is better or worse than another. Some are actually more harmful than others, of course. That the ones I talked about today are on the lighter side, and I'm quite grateful that my impulsive, compulsive habits in the past and currently have been on the lighter side for the most part. If you have some track record, even if it's just a short track record of being there for yourself with some measure of compassion and a loving intention to be present with yourself and hold this space and to see through this, that's a great opportunity to do something like I just shared with you today as an example, to do shadow work, radical forgiveness, where you can either write it down or speak it out. I think writing can help because it can help you organize that. And there's something visceral about writing and writing the words, and it's okay and it's worth forgiving. And possibly writing down the Hooponopono prayer and saying it, speaking it at the same time. The two together can be very supportive, very helpful. That's in part why I think radical forgiveness has been so helpful for me as well. The speaking it, the writing and speaking it, as the radical forgiveness worksheets do provide for us. It's like a great combination to write it and speak it at the same time, or write it first and then speak it. But just to give yourself that compassionate space and allow within the privacy of your own home or bedroom to allow yourself to have whatever emotion wants to come up, whatever memories wants to come up without getting too focused into a story, but allowing yourself to be the witness at the same time that these emotions are coming up and these memories are coming up. This perhaps it's a flashback or a certain image, a certain memory of a part of an experience or an entire experience that comes up for you. And just to be aware, be the witness and that observer of it, but also feel the emotions of that child self. Usually it's 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, maybe up to your teens, but of that younger version of yourself who repressed and pushed down those very painful feelings from that painful experience with one of your parents or grandparents or extended family members or somebody else, but to allow yourself to be present with that and to ultimately say that's okay and it's worth forgiving. And it's worth forgiving yourself if there's a behavior that you're not proud of that's coming up, like we saw my example. So the same for yourself. And then to do a kind of a radical reframe, like I shared with you here, just picking out a couple positives, like 2 or 3 positives from the situation and reframing it. Being careful not to tell the victim story again, but actually allow it. Radical forgiveness tells us not to retell the victim story when we do a radical reframe, a reframe that's not so much based in world of humanity terms, but more so from that higher perspective of what you gained ultimately, the perspective you gained, the insight you gained, what you likely avoided, or you were able to shift and change faster and see through in a way that your parents never could or did because of that painful example they set for you. That is the gold of this, and it can really lighten you. So, on that note, I'm going to leave it at that. But this, again, is a very powerful healing modality that I would encourage you to do, forgiving yourself, forgiving the situation, ultimately letting it be okay, and then reframing it.